such a pleasure being here today. I'm very excited to be sharing my thoughts around business for good and how we can start businesses as a force for good and unleash the power of purpose. So what I'll be doing here today is I'll be talking about some issues that we're facing and how businesses can become a way of addressing these issues. I'll share some ideas, frameworks, concepts, and inspirational examples with you so we can all implement these ideas in our organizations and also in our life, as I'll also be talking about individual purpose. As I speak, if you have any questions, please type them on the Q&A and we will get to them in the end. So I was listening to the news this week and actually the whole year. It's been quite daunting. Hasn't it? So look at our world today. There are so many issues, from poverty and wealth gap, where 61 people have the same amount of wealth as half the world, where 900 million people don't have access to clean water. Climate change is affecting us daily. And of course, health crisis and COVID, which affected everyone around the world this year. And so it can be so daunting that sometimes we don't even want to think about it. Some of us don't even listen to the news anymore. We just think we don't want to know. But when we do know, when we do develop awareness to what is happening in the world around us with empathy and compassion, we can then become the change we want to see in the world. And when I say we, I mean individuals and organizations. Even big corporations can become a force for good in our world. And today I will talk about why and how this can be done. So the idea of business as a force for good is actually a shift that has been happening mainly in the last decade, when people realize that businesses have the power, the resources, the knowledge, people, intellect, even physical venues, and all of these amazing resources can be used to address some of the problems that I've showed you, some of the global challenges that we face. And that if we will act as businesses, not as charitable donors, so we're seeing a shift from corporate philanthropy where businesses just give some money to charity. Instead, we're using businesses as businesses with our knowledge, with the same way that we manage our business, we manage the global issues that we're facing. And if we do that, then there is no limit to what can be achieved. We are seeing businesses that are now becoming part of the solution, not just part of the problem, something that we've seen mainly in the last century. Here is one inspirational example, Patagonia. You probably heard of them. It's a really large company selling outdoor apparels and so on. And they're actually been founded by Yvon Chouinard with the idea of showing that a company can be sustainable, that planet Earth is the major stakeholder of the company, to a point where they actually tell you, don't buy our products. You see this ad, don't buy this jacket, because they actually encourage you to repair, recycle, reuse instead of buying more and more. This is the answer to the fast fashion that we're seeing around the world, and what can be done to actually not just change business, but change our mindset as consumers and as the public. Companies like Patagonia and other companies that I'll be talking about today are who they are because they start with a strong why. So you've probably seen the TED Talk by Simon Sinek. If you haven't, go watch it. It's a wonderful TED Talk that talks about what differentiate successful companies and leaders, and it is because they're starting with a strong why. Everyone knows what they do and how they do it. People, organization, we all know what we do. We can define our role. And every time I start an MBA class and I ask my students to present themselves, usually they tell me what they do for a job and where they are in their MBA. But that's what we do. We may be able to actually explain how we do it. But if we want to succeed and if we want to have an impact, then we need to know why we do what we do. And this is important because people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. If we're able to articulate what we do as a business with a strong why, we can then engage everyone around us. So that brings me to the idea of purpose. I'll talk about personal purpose and then about organizational purpose. Purpose in general is the reason for which something was created or for which something exists. So if we take, for example, this cup of water, the reason for which it exists is for me to be able to hold my water in it so I can drink it while I talk. This is a really simple example with an object. When we move to human beings and organizations, obviously it's more complicated. And oftentimes we move through our lives without really being able to articulate what is our personal purpose. And so I found a way to do that in a sort of an easier way for you to find your purpose, discover your purpose. No one is going to come knocking at your door, giving you an envelope, here is your life purpose. Instead of thinking, I'm going to discover my purpose, we need to start living a more purposeful life. And the way to do it is to start thinking, what am I good at? What is my talent? Where are my skills? And that could be related to your work, or it could be related to your hobby, or just something that you're good at in general, like empathy and active listening. What gives you joy? And how can you tie both of these to creating an impact around you? And that could be with others or even globally. And so when I talk about purpose, I don't just mean the purpose of living your life, protecting your family, which is all great, but I'm talking about impact purpose, more specifically unique impact purpose, which is the purpose of benefiting others through the sense of service. I can find my purpose. I can find my meaningfulness in life and at work. So that brings me to the next idea, which is organizational purpose. And just like individuals, organizations need to discover and share their purpose with all their stakeholders. Similarly, they need to discover what they're good at. So what is my brand standing for? What am I good at? What kind of products am I selling? What kind of services am I delivering? What am I known for? How am I positioned in the market? And how can I use both of these to create a positive impact? So if I'm an apparel company, how can I use my production line to become more sustainable? If I'm an ice cream company, how can I use my product to raise awareness to environmental crisis? The definition of organizational purpose is an aspirational reason for being, which inspires the organization and its stakeholders to benefit society. Again, you see, this is not my definition. This is a definition of organizational purpose, but you can see how organizational purpose is also an impact purpose, because it's all about benefiting others, benefiting society. When we go through this self-transcendence, when we just don't occupy ourselves by ourselves and our little problems, but really try to figure out how can we serve others, that's when we have a purpose for being. And as an organization, this can inspire and engage our stakeholders. So you can see that having a strong purpose can have several benefits for the organization and its stakeholders. If we look at our people, everyone wants to engage their employees, right? We live in a world where 75% of employees are not engaged and 25% are actively disengaged. And that's a really major problem for businesses. We need to find a way of engaging people, and paying them, incentivizing them doesn't really work. We need to engage them emotionally. And the best way to engage our employees emotionally is to show that our organization is serving the world. People, especially millennials and Generation Z and Y, are purpose-driven, and they want to know that they work for and even study at organizations that are purpose-driven as well. If I have a strong purpose for my workplace, that can have a spillover effect and making me feel that I have a strong purpose in life. And so that creates engagement, that creates a shared narrative of impact, a sense of affiliation and pride. I've seen employees who were embarrassed to say which organizations they work for, moving to feeling really proud when the organization started having a strong purpose. And so that also serves the organization because it enhances our brand and reputation, it enhances employee performance. But notably, it becomes a destination of choice for people who are purpose-driven. And you want to attract this kind of people because they are intrinsically motivated to make a difference and help the organization achieve its goals. Most importantly, because we're talking about impact purpose, if we have a strong impact purpose, we can benefit society, we can change the community in which we operate, and create a long-lasting social impact. And so that inspired me to redefine the idea of corporate social responsibility. There are over 150 definitions of corporate social responsibility. You may think, why do we need another one? But this one helped me to articulate the idea that we need a holistic and long-term approach where businesses understand that we have a broad responsibility beyond making a profit based on stakeholder integration, which I'll talk about in a minute, and ethical behavior, utilizing our firm's resources and brand to address societal and environmental issues. And so you could see that the purpose here is not to just address the needs of the shareholders and maximize shareholder value, but to take a more holistic approach, which is embedded in everything that we do as an organization. Here is a wonderful example. You probably know of it, Ben & Jerry's. You've tasted their wonderful ice cream. But what I wanted to say here is that right from the 1970s, when Ben Cohen and Jerry Springfield started Ben & Jerry's, they have had a social mission alongside with a product mission and their economic mission. Right from the start, they said, our mission has 3 pillars, and social mission is the first one: to operate the company in a way that actively recognizes the central role that business plays in society, and by initiating innovative ways to improve the quality of life locally, nationally, and internationally. That's our purpose. Is it a perfect company? No. But they're doing everything that they can to try and make their entire supply chain and value chain more sustainable, and to try and tie their brand to social environmental causes, such as the ad you see here: if it's melted, it's ruined. It's true for our for ice cream, and it's true for our planet. And that brings me to another new concept that was developed in the last decade on conscious capitalism. Conscious capitalism was developed by the founder and CEO of Whole Food Markets. That's an American retail chain that sells healthy food, very sustainable, fighting for animal rights and so on. And so with Professor Raj Sisodia, the two of them wrote a book in 2014, Conscious Capitalism, a fantastic book. You should really read it. And what they say is that conscious capitalism acknowledges that capitalism can be good. It's not inherently bad, but we need to change capitalism. We don't not just need to change business. We need to change capitalism. We need to change the system. And so to do that, we need to have businesses that work with a higher purpose, which is what I've just spoken about, and strong core values. Values really matter for people and organizations and their stakeholders. We need to have stakeholder integration, which is not stakeholder management or stakeholder prioritization. Stakeholder integration creates a situation where we have a win-win-win-win-win or win-6 situation where all our stakeholders benefit from our thriving business. We have conscious leaders who work with awareness of themselves and others in order to really lead by example and make a difference. And then we create an organization with a conscious culture and management where everyone is involved in achieving that higher purpose. These kind of ideas are changing the way that we see businesses around the world. But there is no other concept that conceptualizes that better than social entrepreneurship. Social entrepreneurship and social business and social innovation is really not doing CSR, but starting a business, founding a business with the idea of how can we use the knowledge, tools, power of business to address a social problem. And I'll give you an example in the next slide, but this is an idea that is really capturing the imagination of a lot of business founders. I teach social entrepreneurship. I was the director of the Master of Social Entrepreneurship at MGSM. And I often had students who came to my class on social entrepreneurship because they just wanted to start a business. But when they saw the power of social entrepreneurship, they thought, you know what, I'm actually going to start a social enterprise and use my business to make a positive difference in the world. And so that is about people who are starting a new business, but we're seeing an even more recent idea on social intrapreneurship, a groundbreaking idea, really new, that we don't need to start a social enterprise to make a difference. Even if I work in a big organization, I can use my innovation and creativity to help my organization address social problems. This is the idea of social intrapreneurship, where I'm still being employed in the business and I try to help my employer to make a difference. This is similar to business intrapreneurship, where people work inside a business, like a Sony employee who came up with the idea of Sony PlayStation. But this is true for social entrepreneurship, where people who are still employed in an organization come up with social innovation to help their organization become more sustainable. One of my favorite examples is an employee who is still working with Westpac, the Australian bank, and he came up with an idea of starting an organization called I'm a Boat Person, who firstly just helped refugees in general, and then through the help of Westpac, they've started focusing more on financial literacy of refugees. This one person working in an organization came up with an idea with the support of his employer to try and make a difference. I'm going to skip this one because I want to move to the example that I have here, which is Thank You. You probably all heard about Thank You. It's an Australian social enterprise, started as a thank you water company. So they started selling plastic bottles of water in order to address the problem of 900 million people not having access to clean water. Daniel Flynn, with his two friends here in the photo, came across the notion that 900 million people don't have access to clean water, and thought, okay, this is really daunting news. But instead of ignoring it, they start thinking about it with empathy and what can I do with a sense of self-efficacy? What can I do to make a difference? Right now, the company is moving away from selling bottled water because it's not sustainable, but they have many other products from body care to Thank You Baby in order to address different social problems. And the consumers are all part of the solution, because when you buy their products, each product has an impact tracker where you can actually track the impact that you can create. So this company and many other social enterprises become the change we want to see in the world. And if we're moving into a system change, not just solving the problem, but solving the system that creates poverty, that creates the problem where 900 million people don't have access to clean water, we need to now move to political activism. And in the last 4 years, we've seen an increasing number of companies moving into corporate political activism, where they try to change public mindset, where they try to advocate for policy change. And we saw that, for example, in Australia with the Marriage Equality Act, where Airbnb aligned their slogan of belong anywhere to until we all belong, and they were selling a broken ring to symbolize how some people are missing out on these equal rights and opportunities. In the last Black Lives Matter, we had a number of companies that were standing up for political activism. But if it's not fully aligned with who you are as a business and what you do every day, it may actually backfire. So you have to adopt a holistic and genuine approach to your responsibility and to your ability to make a difference in the world. And so what I've tried to do here is show you just a few ideas and concepts that have been taking place and helped us to reimagine the role of business in society, and how we can all individually and organizationally try to change who we are, find our purpose, and deliver a change for a long-term impact. And with this, I'm going to now shift to Suzanne and ask her to run the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Debbie. So in a world where people have such low trust in corporations, what can companies do to increase trust in the business sector, in CSR and in their organisations?
Thank you for starting the Q&A, Suzanne. Yes, we've seen by the Edelman report that there is not a lot of trust in corporations, even in companies that we think should have been a force for good, like pharmaceutical companies. And so for the public to retrust the corporations, to see them as a force for good, we need to have a holistic and genuine approach where the idea of having a positive role in society is embedded in everything that we do.
Wonderful. So what is the role of leadership? So if CEOs are not driving the change, what can we do when leadership is not on board?
It does make it harder. We've seen amazing corporate leaders like Yvonne Chouinard, Paul Polman, Ben & Jerry, and so on. They have led with purpose and they have changed the entire organization. It doesn't mean that if leadership is not on board, we cannot do anything. Every employee in the organization has a voice. A voice is not just a privilege, it's also a responsibility. And so if we use our voice and if we use our imagination, innovation, and creativity to help our organization become more sustainable, we can then lead a bottom-up kind of change.
So it seems to take quite a long time to shift towards CSR for some organisations, and still many, I don't think, are doing it very well. Can we afford to wait until everybody gets it?
We could, but we can no longer wait. With the problems I've spoken about in the beginning of my presentation, some of them are really affecting us today. Climate change and COVID-19 means that we need solutions right now. And so for companies to just do it as a PR, greenwashing, we have no time to waste. We really need more leaders to come on board. And I was really encouraged by the CEO roundtable last year that Tony spoke about in the beginning, where they redefined the purpose of business around serving all stakeholders. And we need more and more companies to come on board and come on board now.
So we've got a great question here from Anna, and it's a popular one from a couple of other people also, which is, since Whole Foods sold to Amazon and Ben & Jerry's sold to Unilever, have these ideals around business for good survived the change in ownership?
That's a great question. And it's quite interesting. There are a few academic articles about what happens when big multinational buy these social icons. And they buy them because they are purpose-driven organizations. And they know that buying them would create a halo effect on the way that their business look like and their positioning in the market. Interestingly, what happens when a company like Amazon, which is not well known for its CSR, buys it, and a company like Whole Foods Market, where CSR is everything for them, it takes a couple of years before the mother company is starting to change. So usually what happens at first, a lot of people would criticize those companies for selling out, and it will take a while before we will actually see the little social icon, the little mouse changing the elephant, where the big multinational company will change its values and its purpose as sometimes as a result of having this strong social icon in their portfolio.
Thanks, Debbie. We've got a great question here from Mohammed, and he's asking, who decides what a good purpose is for an organisation to follow?
Thanks, Mohammed. Well, if we're looking at an organizational purpose and we are doing that with a social responsibility and consciousness, then we have to work through stakeholder integration. I've seen so many organizations redefining their purpose as a top-down, sometimes as an outside-in. So we hire a consultancy agency to tell us what our purpose is. We know what our purpose is based on who we are as an organization and our history, and we need to utilize that to really create a purpose that talks to us as the people who are part of these organizations. And so we need a stakeholder integration when we define our purpose, work with all of our employees, our consumers, our shareholders to redefine our purpose and have something that talks to everyone.
Thank you. So another question from Rosalina, and it's, are there any longitudinal studies that you can share showing the benefit of organisational purpose and CSR on the society and business itself?
That's a great question. I don't know if anyone has done a longitudinal study specifically on that, but I've seen companies that actually measure their long-term impact. So it's not a general study, but each organization measure its long-term impact. While many organizations, many companies, when they report on their social impact, what they usually report on is their input and their activities. So how many people volunteered last year, how much money we have donated. Some companies can actually measure their long-term macro impact on society and how they've contributed to a macro change in the community in which they operate. And so to see some of these companies and social enterprises actually looking at the long-term impact that they've created, it can be very inspirational.
Thank you. A question from Liz, and also related with Janelle here. There seems to be a lot of issues, very daunting, not sure how to overcome them all. And at the end of the day, I'm not sure that investors really care about social impact as much as financial return. Do you have any comments on that?
That's a really interesting question, because we are actually seeing a shift in shareholder mindset. So let's take, for example, Amazon. Amazon, as I said, is not a company that's well known for its social responsibility towards employees and the environment, but it was actually the shareholders through shareholder activism that started to pressure the company to report on their sustainability issue. We are seeing an increasing number of shareholders who care about sustainability issue, one, because they care about the planet, but also knowing that if a company is not sustainable, it may not last for the next 20 years. And so if I want to invest in that company, I need to make sure this is going to be sustained over the long run. And so we're seeing a shift into ethical, responsible shareholders. We're seeing a responsible, ethical investment, impact investment. This is still just the tip of the iceberg, and we need it to be a lot more global. But actually, the whole movement of impact investing is using the power of money and investment to try and drive a long-term impact in the world.
Okay, we've got a great question here from Rebecca, which is, she would like some advice for someone wanting to get into diversity, inclusion, or activism roles in their organisation. So what kind of experience or skills do you need to be doing that?
Well, you can always take a unit at MQBS on CSR and learn how to do it better, because there is a knowledge that's you need to have. There are great books around on CSR and taking a more holistic approach, which you can start there. Start building the knowledge base around these issues. Make yourself acquainted with some of the concepts that I spoke about today, and then go up and say, this is really important for me. I would like to lead this change. It could be that there is a role already and you could do it. It could be that they build up a role for you. There are always ways to start, even if it's not your full-time paid role. You can maybe raise your hand and said, I'd like to start a committee for social inclusion in our organization. And it's an extra role behavior, but I'm going to get people who are passionate about it and work in our organization to make sure it's more inclusive.
Unfortunately, we do have more questions, but we've run out of time. So I'd love you to summarize if you can, Debbie. That would be great.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming here today and for your wonderful questions. I'd love to continue this conversation. We can maybe connect on LinkedIn and continue this conversation. And remember, every change begins with someone who thinks, I can do something about it. And so even if you are not leading a multinational company, but you are just an employee, you still have a voice, you still have the power to make a difference. Start by finding your purpose and help your organization define its purpose so you can all work together to make a difference.
Thanks very much, Debbie. Macquarie Business School offers a range of short courses, both virtual and face-to-face, and the contact details for those are on the screen. With that, I'd like to thank everyone for participating in today's webinar. The chat and Q&A was very active, so thank you very much for that. Thank you again to Debbie for her contribution and time today. And I'd encourage you to keep your eye out for future webinars and short courses offered by Macquarie Business School. Thank you.